So my name is Ash. I am the programs coordinator at AgeWell for the Epic AT platform and for the older adult and caregiver stakeholders. And so I am coming from Montreal, Quebec today. Just before I begin, I just want to share some promising practices just for the webinar today for accessibility purposes. So the first thing is today it's a recorded session, so that's really important to know. So if you decide to put out a question or something like that, just know that it is a recording. The next thing is that if you need closed captioning, you will find that at the bottom of the Zoom screen. It is for English, but I always say it is automized. So it's important to remember that there will be some inaccuracies. So just always know that when you are using the closed captioning, but I always recommend it because it's always interesting to see how effective it is. And Zoom is usually pretty good. My next kind of accessibility point is be kind and ensure to be respectful in the chat amongst your participants and also to the panel, to me or to panelists whenever there is an AgeWell webinar. If anyone does show any inappropriate or kind of aggressive communication, that person will be removed from today's webinar. I am coming from Montreal, Quebec today. I am a white woman with short brown hair. I wear kind of these cat eye glasses that have a green, blue, and white kind of top to them. I have green eyes, and I'm wearing earrings, dangling earrings, and a gray long sleeve shirt. So before we begin, I do want to ask everyone in the chat maybe to share where you're coming from today and and what brings you here today. So let's get to it. Okay, so today's topic today is on promising practices of older adult research and participant recruitment. So before we begin, I just want to kind of give a brief outline of what I will be talking about today. So AgeWell is, I'll first give a kind of a one-on-one about what AgeWell is, and then I'm going to go through some of the importance and challenges of older adult research participant recruitment. And then I'm going to share some promising practices of recruitment for older adults, and then how to create inclusive recruitment materials. And I will have some examples to show you. And then, and those are the models that I hope that maybe you will consider adopting in your own work. I should just briefly say that I am someone that has done research with older adults and members of the deaf and disability communities. So I understand the complexity of learning how to connect with those communities, in what ways you should create accessible recruitment materials, and some of the challenges that might come up. So I will get started. So first up, I want to share a little bit about AgeWell. So AgeWell is a national network funded through the Networks of Centers of Excellence program. Over the past 8 years, AgeWell has been at the forefront of innovation in the field of age tech, in the intersections of technology and aging. As a community of researchers, older adults, caregivers, government, not-for-profit, and industry leaders, our mission is to accelerate the delivery of technology-based solutions, including services and policies that make a meaningful difference in the lives of Canadians. In short, we bring everyone together to co-create practical solutions to real-world problems. Oops, sorry. Too fast. I got one a little too fast, or skipped one. There we go. All right, you can't forget this one. This one's an important one. So we have 4 innovation hubs across the country focused on specific research areas like sensors and analytics, digital health, and opportunities like translating existing technology for use in remote and rural populations or supporting the translation of research into policy. In addition to the over 60 startups, we support financially. We're comprised of about 350 researchers, that's a lot, and over 1,200 trainees working on over 200 projects across 49 institutions in Canada. And some of you are some of those researchers and trainees. Our focus is on translational research and research that is implementable. So each project works closely with partners from industry, government, and the not-for-profit sector to really ensure that the project outcomes make it out of the research lab. We want to have solutions that can be really brought to the real world. Some of our projects work closely with a cohort of older adults and caregivers who act as co-creators on projects. And I said this in multiple presentations. Older adults in our networks are essential to the success of this network. And more importantly, we always say at HWell that those older adults are not just the validators of the final project, really crucial co-creators throughout research, throughout creating innovation and understanding those problems that a lot of these researchers are trying to create digital solutions for. So what is the role of older adults in AgeWell? Well, AgeWell is passionate about achieving a real world impact, like I said. It could be a new technology, service, or policy. We want to ensure that our products will be practical and valuable. When I say we, I mean members of our network. That is why AgeWell is committed to involving older adults and caregivers in all of our research and developmental stages. It's the AgeWell way of doing things. Older adult network members are crucial participants in research projects, provide imperative feedback on research proposals, and represent the essential stakeholders in a variety of committees, such as our older adult and caregiver advisory board. And they also attend our events. Some of you might be attending today. And also they are really important in helping us co-create an accessible and more informed age tech industry that is improving the lives of older adult Canadians every day. So I'm now going to go into some of the importance and the challenges of older adult research participant recruitment. And I should say, before I get into today's kind of practices and kind of tips and tricks, is that you'll probably find that a lot of my presentation applies to ways you can recruit to all ages. So it's really important to consider that. And also that although we are focusing today on older adults, I will briefly tie in some parts about how caregivers are involved. So why should you include older adults in your research? So older adults are often underrepresented in research, especially clinical. So who are considered older adults? Often most literature would say that it's people between the ages of 65 and over. So it has been proven that when older adults do participate in research, it increases their self-confidence, through the feeling of giving back to something, and also like increases their sense of achievement and satisfaction. They know that they're giving back to and contributing to solutions that are going to improve the lives of communities that they're a part of. And it helps older adults also build new skills and networks. But what about you? It really will improve the quality of your research, particularly because you will be including diverse perspectives from people with lived experiences, especially for the problems that you're trying to potentially create solutions for. So it also improves problem solving skills, working with communities that are outside of your own. And it most importantly will break down barriers of power that often exist between researchers and participants. It builds respectful and trusting relationships as well. And more importantly, these are people that you can potentially rely on for future research partnerships. research partnerships are not just between researchers, but communities as well. So what are some of the challenges of older adult recruitment? Um, and you'll see that I've listed health, social, and cultural barriers. Also, the challenges sometimes of consent, especially when someone has a cognitive disease or disability. Understanding what that consent looks like can be difficult, especially even when working with a caregiver or the person that's legally responsible for that person. There's also barriers of reaching out to older adults, particularly that live in long term care homes, and gaining the cooperation of the long term care management. There might be sometimes past experiences with that long-term care home where they maybe worked with a researcher, didn't work out, and so sometimes a bad experience can lead to a bit of hesitation working with other researchers. There's also accessibility considerations. So, for example, if you are wanting to do research with people on site, like an on-site facility, for example, at the university that you are working from, it's really important to ensure that that site is accessible, especially for those that are have physical disabilities. So, and also just like how does that person find where they're going? Is there clear signage? All of these add into the difficulty and also sometimes someone's decision on really participating in a research project. And that's my cat in the background. It's a common occurrence in my webinars. So uh, I guess it will, one of my cats might make an appearance today. There's also transportation concerns. How will someone get to that place? And do you have funding potentially to cover those transportation costs for them? So for example, paying for a taxi. Uh, Even on top of that, if it is over Zoom, does someone have access to a laptop or internet services if they live in a more rural area where they can't get to you in person, but they also maybe have limited internet access, or also just digital literacy of how to use a platform like Zoom. Um, and also caregivers. How do you work with a caregiver? And what does it mean to ensure that you're focusing on the participant and not just on the inclusion of the caregiver, or do you want to include the caregiver? All of these play an important role in yeah, some of the challenges you might face. So before you start recruiting, you have to ask yourself some questions. So why? Why are you doing this work? What is the greater purpose of the work you are doing? And that will really help the potential participants that you want to work with. If you can tell them this is the bigger picture of this project, that will add some motivation to them wanting to work with you. Who? This is the biggest thing, especially for today's presentation. What communities or kinds of individuals are you focusing on and prioritizing in your research? Who are you researching with? So are you researching alone or on a team? And why are their perspectives important, especially for those potential research participants? Why are they important to your research and the innovation that you are working on? What has already been done? What do you need to know from the communities you want to work with? And what can you learn from each other? And how you can make a kind of a mutual relationship. And that's again, breaking down those barriers of power. When? This is a big one. What is the time commitments going to look like? So particularly when you're in your project, how will you plan out how those potential participants at what point you want to include them, and what will be the time commitments that they will have to expect and create time for in their own schedules. And also, what kind of relationships do you want to have with them? And I include that with when, because especially when you want to create a long-standing relationship with them, you need to consider, well, how are you going to do that? And again, it's like creating those timelines. And where, and I kind of touched on that in the challenges. Where do you want to promote your recruitment materials? What will you, where will you host your interactions. For example, be on site or over a virtual space or in community spaces that those potential participants use. And most importantly, like I said, what are those accessibility considerations? And it's really important that when you start doing that recruitment process, that you've already have ensured that those accessibility considerations have been covered. Sometimes it's not until we contact and created that relationship with the participant, then it's like, then we start considering accessibility. You want to show that you've already considered all those accessibility needs and that you've hosted them in the way you're recruiting. And that means that people will feel more comfortable working with you because they don't constantly need to disclose those access needs. And the next is how. How will you learn from the potential research participants? And how will you ensure that you are using communication models that are ones that they use in their own everyday lives? So these questions will help you enhance your recruitment promotion processes and understand how you can strategize those kind of first conversations with potential participants. So, promising practices. So what do I mean when I say the term promising practices, and why am I not saying the term best practices? So I use the term promising practices because it's less prescriptive and encourages not this kind of one box fits all approach, which is sometimes often assumed with best practices. I'm sharing a range of possibilities today that you might want to consider when you are looking at recruiting older adults in your projects and innovative design planning. How you recruit older adults will depend on your own project, the needs of the communities you work with, and the types of relationships you want to build with them. There's so many ways for older adults to be research participants and how you can recruit them. And it really will vary on the project and also sometimes the funding that you have. So making those first connections. So some of you may say to yourselves that you already have some of those networks already created for yourself, which is amazing. But some of you have never had kind of that first interaction with an older adult community group or just don't know where to begin. So this is what this slide is about. So, so when you are creating those first connections, you want to look at your network. Whom do you know that can connect you with community members or organizations you want to work with? Someone tied to the community and with a great network will help you expedite those first introductions. They will also have a good understanding of the rituals of how those communities want to be approached. And sometimes it's not just like someone wants to be approached by a simple email. Some communities, for example, like the deaf community, often prefer someone from the community that's introducing them because there's a trust, because they know that that person, that community member that's introducing them has potentially shared with that colleague how to best understand their culture, their access needs, and modes of communication. And I just want to say that, you know, a lot of these conversations also depend on the contention of like, where do people live? This is something to always consider. So are the communities you want to reach out to, are they living in more urban areas, suburban or rural? What are the varying levels of technological access of where they are? And also the concern of digital literacy. Best not to assume what those digital literacies are, because that can be very condescending. But you can always ask like, oh, like, you know, do you have access to Zoom? Have you ever used Zoom? And then always you can provide potentially like a YouTube video that's maybe very short to show them that, but just always ask those questions versus assuming. Reaching out to and contacting community and advocacy groups that support older adults or focus on older adults, even on the national and local level. So this is like very much about reaching out and prioritizing those groups that like really look at the lived experience of those communities. So some examples are the Alzheimer's Society of Canada. They often have like local chapters. So for example, like the Montreal Alzheimer's Society of Montreal, for example. And then even in Montreal alone, we have the Contactivity Center, the New Hope Senior Citizen Center, and RECA, which is the Ressources ethno-culturelles contre les bus envers les aînés, so a community group that focuses on anti-elder abuse. And then always like looking at how you can contact them. So most of these community groups will have a point person that will work with researchers and have done a lot of partnership work. So that's the person that you want to ask for. And then when you email them or you reach out to them, introduce yourself, give a short description, maybe like 2 or 3 sentences of your project in lay terms. So meaning like no technical kind of language. And why you think that creating that mutual kind of partnership is important. So not just about like, oh, this is how you will benefit my research, but also like how I can benefit, how, you know, members of your community potentially can benefit from participating in this research as well. And yes, the other thing that I always say is don't be scared. I know that's kind of hard to say, but don't be scared to just start those conversations even before you have ethics approval. So what that just means is you are just reaching out to create just a first connection. You're not saying, you know, legally, would you like to participate in my research, because you need to have ethics approval for that. But it's always okay to do that first kind of reach and say, hi, my name is Ash. This is the work I'm doing. I would love just to have a brief meeting with you so that I can better understand RECA or contactivity. And often when you do that, especially before you do your ethics approval and start your ethics applications, you can actually shape that application in conversation with that touch point person from that group. So for example, my own research, when I was doing work with theater companies that work with artists with disabilities or disabled artists across Canada, when I was creating those consent forms, I actually asked for a little bit of feedback, and I said, hey, like, you know, I'm creating these 3 different forms, one for caregivers or for legal guardians, one for individuals that don't identify as someone having you know, needing support cognitively to understand the form, and people that do need that deeper kind of support with understanding the form. And a lot of my colleagues were like, well, actually, it would be best just to actually make one big form, one inclusive form that can include all parties, and if it can be put on one page. And this really helped expedite the process. So those are just simple things. And I also think call. Call me old school, but often we think that we need to send an introductory email. Don't be scared to call. You'll be surprised of what one phone call can do. For me, it led to one quick phone call that I thought I was just going to learn information. And at the end of that phone call, I was being invited out to Vancouver for 2 summers to do research. And it was amazing. And that led to some big opportunities in my academic career. And then on top of that, the other thing that you can consider is hosting an information session. So mainly when working with older adults that live in long-term care homes or retirement residences, or even those that live in low-income housing, hosting a simple 15-minute information session with potential postcards, so something that's like concrete, that like an educational document that folks can walk away with, can really have a huge impact on how potential older adult participants can see how you are invested in their kind of lived experiences and also feedback. And also, it really does set up kind of those meaningful relationships of mutual respect, meaning like you have come into their space and you have really wanted to learn in conversation with them. Of course, in light of COVID, that sometimes this can be more challenging. So even just hosting something over Zoom, where maybe members of that long-term care home can maybe come and have access to, and maybe in the community space, uh, and just you being on screen, that still is a major step in that information session. And uh, especially in these sessions, you want to make sure that you are not coming off as like performing to be the expert, but as someone that genuinely wants to learn with them. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. So just some little tips about that information session that I was talking about. So you really want to be sensitive to any concerns your audiences may have that are attending your information session. So especially that's towards the Q&A, really saying like there are no like bad questions here. Please, like if something wasn't clear, let me know. If you're concerned about time commitment, or if I said something in my presentation that was not clear, please let me know. So really appeasing those concerns. The next thing would be that you want to be clear and concise. So what this means is you do not want to use a language that's heavily academic or has a technical jargon to it. You want to make sure that that presentation is under 15 minutes, because I think more than 15 minutes, you might lose the attention of your potential participants. And I would say consider providing food. For accessibility purposes, I think it's better to get prepackaged food because you know that there's not this cross-contamination. And I always say it's best not to have any alcohol. And the reason for that is you do not know the lived experience of some of these individuals in the space, and it's best to avoid any kind of alcoholic beverages. It will create a more accessible and inclusive space to have those dialogues about your project and potential kind of research participant opportunities. And speak clearly and slowly. Something that you also may want to consider is having actually like a closed captioner, or having a screen where those automatic closed captions can be available to someone. So maybe it's like a screen at the side that is projecting, say, for example, a Word document that you're able to have that automized transcription. And the reason for that is that's really good for folks that are hard of hearing or non-English speakers. It gives another layer of accessibility. And also, if you have the funding, and if you know that if the members of the deaf community are going to be integral to your work, you need to have a sign language interpreter. This is very, very important. And if you do work with that sign language interpreter, for example, ASL or LSQ, you want to send your presentation before that information session so they can kind of get a grasp of like what they will be translating that night. And always have a short take-home document. And this doesn't have to be at the information session, but just something that you can give to people, even if it's an informal conversation. And my suggestion is a postcard. So let me just share a little bit more about that. So in this picture, you will see in the middle what looks like it's a postcard. It has an image of a woman holding a camera, an older woman holding a camera. And at the bottom, it says Interaction, which is the name of the project that I was a project coordinator on a few years ago. And on the back of that, postcard, there was actually like a brief description of that project. So this project was with ACT, which is the Aging Communication and Technologies project. And this ACT is a research project that addresses the transformation of the experiences of aging with the proliferation of new forms of mediated communications and networked societies. So they use postcards like this, for example, with the project Interaction, to kind of to be able to give to people, whether it's at conferences or in presentations across Montreal or across Canada. And the other thing too that's great about a postcard, and if you do have the access to for this type of funding, is how thick the card is. If you are working with members from the low vision or blind communities, you can actually have potential access services create like a braille inscription on some of these cards. So sometimes those postcards are great because it allows for a lot of inclusivity. And again, if you don't have access to do a card, even just like a simple piece of paper that maybe you've cut out with like just a brief blurb with your contact is something that you can pass out. But something that you can pass out that people can take home with them is always lovely. So the next part of the presentation is just really understanding how you can set up trusting relationships. So one of the worst things that we can do as researchers is promoting ourselves as fixers and making older adults feeling like they need to be fixed. And this is something that I learned from an amazing scholar in the arts called Julie Salverson, and she talks about this idea of the aesthetic of injury and how often in Canada we kind of put these categories as of who needs fixing and who are fixers, and that's not something that you want to promote. And she discusses in her work how to undo that, but in her work she's more in theater studies. But this is something I've applied to my own work. So again, it's not this idea that you don't want to promote an older adult feeling like, okay, you're only in this research because you're a body that needs to be cured. It's not about that. They are really important knowledge stakeholders and valuable resources to what you are doing. So the most powerful participant research relationships are built with mutual respect for what both parties can bring to each other. And older adults are also experts and the best co-designers. So to kind of help create those trusting relationships, I always say hire, if possible, a community and consultant. Working with someone from the community and really paying them, whether it be like an honorarium or a gift card, can really help older adults feel like they're being represented and that you are really invested in understanding their lived experience and working with them. This is especially important from an EDI perspective, especially if you're working with folks from BIPOC communities or the deaf and disability communities. They are great, especially, or even just someone that is from the community that is, say, that speaks Spanish or is French speaking. They're going to understand the language that you need to use to connect with your participants. And also translate some of that recruitment materials. And they might have an idea of those best translation forms. Especially for the deaf and hard of hearing community, which I'll show you in a later part of my presentation. Having, like, for example, a recruitment video with a deaf interpreter, and having that video where that deaf interpreter shares information about your project and the contacts, it really does help create a more meaningful welcome space to those potential older adults that are from the deaf community. It's different than, like, for example, me speaking here and just providing closed captions. Again, you really want to show that representation. And you want to prioritize communication models that they use. So do not limit yourself here. Consider cold calls, different forms of communications. Like I said, just whether it be through emails or just contacting another person that knows them. Even creating a booth at a mall, if you were able to talk to someone, going to the spaces that a lot of these older adults may be using, again, can create those kind of showing that investment of wanting to connect with them. So let's go into recruitment materials. So it's essential to ensure that all recruitment materials are accessible. So inclusive, especially to the communities you want to prioritize, and show sensitivity. So first I'm going to talk about images and posters. And again, after this section, I'll show some examples of what I'm talking about, ones that I've used in my own work. So when choosing photos for recruitment materials, you want to ensure that you are choosing images and photos that really represent the communities you want to connect with. Do not use images that kind of stereotype or stigmatize those communities. Be dynamic. So consider how you can show photos that cover a spectrum of representation from those potential older adult research participant communities. So this can cover from race, gender, ethnicity, body shape, disability and mobility. These are really important. The last thing you want to promote is like images that your participants may find that really stigmatize their community, and that can really stop conversations instead of open them up. And I always say, try to avoid using, and this is something that's come out of kind of conversations with our communications officers at AgeWell, which is sometimes the clip art can be challenging. So I always say, if you can, best to use like real life photos, even if it's a stock photo of in your recruitment material. So language, your words and writing style can significantly impact your research participant recruitment. You want to ensure you are using language that is clear and simple. Avoid and limit language that is technical or very field specific. And I know that's hard. It's not always easy to do that, but really say to yourself, someone said this to me once, but in during my PhD, if, say, for example, one of your parents that doesn't necessarily work in academia can have access to and understand what you're talking about, that's usually a really good sign, because it shows someone outside of your field knows what you're talking about. And you don't want to be too wordy or long. You really want to keep it brief. And consider that people again, don't want to really read like a long description. You want to start a conversation. So don't think that you need to share everything in that initial kind of recruitment poster or video. So prioritize languages that are used by the community. So for me, example, that's individuals that are, because I live in Montreal, French and English, LSQ and ASL. And also always look at how you can, if you're going to do like a video recruitment, which I think is always a really great way to invite participation. Look at how you can include closed captioning, because again, those that are non-English speakers or hard of hearing, it allows that added accessibility. So be attentive to the tone you are using. So are you being inviting and positive? Are you sharing what impact those potential older adult participants may have? These all add up to creating those first great impressions. So formatting. So use large font. Don't use cursive and italics. This will really help with the readability of your recruitment materials. And also low-key, be less wordy. You really want to prioritize visuals that are clean and organized. Consider, for example, when we were younger, most of us, I don't know if you still do, but reading the newspaper, which a lot of people still do. Maybe I'm old school, but reading those, consider the newspaper ad, and what would draw your attention to a specific ad. Again, it would be a question, for example, that was very straightforward. That would be the first invitation, maybe a visual, and then a very short description of what that ad was looking for. Maybe have, like I said, that a question or two that your potential participants can gravitate towards, and a very short blurb. You also want to consider color. Now, I know I do have the color red in my presentation today, but having a brighter color red can often be jarring. The color blue and green are often very accessible, especially for folks that have sensory disabilities, sensorial disabilities. So really looking at the colors you're using and where you're using those colors. If you can, try and add like that description, visual description for all photos. Sometimes in some of softwares that you can actually input that into the actual photo. When you input it into, like, say for example Zoom, there's actually like a description, a visual description place. And I would also recommend like not using like light colors for your font. Try and use more darker colors that allows the again, like accessibility for what you want to look at. And just before we go into questions, just want to show you some examples. So this is a poster from a project that I did called Interaction, which was with ACT. This is an older poster from 2017 from my doctoral PhD days. That was yesterday. But no, but in all seriousness, this was something that focused on creating drop-in sessions for older adults that lived in low-income housing across Montreal. And we were looking at how we could invite them to have come and learn more about the internet, which we called was like a Wi-Fi party. We had simple, like, you know, come meet who all of us, which was me, actually my sister Carly, ironically, and our other colleague Nora. We described who we were, which sometimes we don't do on posters. I think it's great to really introduce yourself if you can, where it was happening, that we were excited to meet with them, and what they could expect in terms of bringing their own laptops. I think, you know, even looking at this poster, there's things that I would probably do differently. Like I wouldn't put everything in caps, all caps. I would not, I would potentially change the image. But again, this is just kind of showing how you can do it. These are some video examples. So to the left was a project that I participated on with the Canada Council of the Arts with the Université du Québec à Montréal. And this was a review of deaf and disabled artists across Canada. And so one of the things that we did was we actually created a video that included a call for anyone that is ASL or LSQ user. So this is an image of a man that is I believe is an it's an ASL sign language interpreter sharing that information. The bottom right is the wonderful Sherry Baker, who's one of the co-chairs of the Older Adult and Advisory Caregiver Board. This was actually a video that we recently did for Connections Conversations, which is an event that we do at AgeWell with older adults. This was one I did, and I actually inputted the subtitles. If you are interested in something very simple, I would recommend the software called Veed, V-E-E-D. That's what I've used for my subtitles. You can actually get, if you upload the video, there's no way that you can get automatic subtitles. And then you can just clean up whatever is like any inaccuracies. This is what we do currently at AgeWell. So this is when you are interested in advertising with us, you do have to be a network member. You email me and or it will be forwarded to me if you don't email me. And so basically what I asked folks to do is to write a 100-word snapshot of like what their research call is, asking them to kind of, again, do the who, what, why, when, how long, will there be compensation, all that. And again, I really put forward this idea that it's like an ad in a newspaper. So now I'm going to move toward questions, but I do quickly just want to share the email. This is training at agewell slash or dash, I'm sorry, nce.ca. And that's for the training and education department, which I am a part of. So yeah, I will stop sharing my screen and I will open it up to questions. So what I will suggest is if you do want to come to the mic, you totally can. It sounds very like we're having a rap battle. But if you do want to come and do, pose your question verbally, you can. just raise your hand. I will try and get to you, but I do already see a question. You can use the Q&A as well. Be dynamic examples of images and posters. That's from Ian. Yeah, I definitely think so, but I think be dynamic can mean many things. So what I'm saying to you when you be dynamic, I mean, really look at the multitude of ways you can reach out to those communities. Often we just rely on email. And yes, that's very effective, but if you look at multiple ways of doing that recruitment process, you're going to be able to connect with a diversity of potential older adult communities. In my own experience, I had participants that did not have access to a laptop. So again, creating those kind of relationships with the, especially for the project interaction, going to the low-income housing residences and giving those information sessions was really important because it also gave people a face versus just like a name behind an email. Also be dynamic representation in like the photos that you use in your recruitment posters. The poster that I actually showed you in my presentation was ones that I actually would print off physically and post on every single floor in those low-income housing residences that we were working with. And I did that because a lot of the work that we did do was in the actual community spaces that they worked in. So again, it's being dynamic. How can I create the biggest net to create connections with these older adults? How can I show that I really want to create genuine research relationships with them? That's what I mean by dynamic. Okay. Yes, that's a great. So Olive has asked, and I just want to say, Olive Bryanton, who is posing a question right now, if you ever want to have an amazing person to reach out to learn about like the beauty of working with older adults, Olive Bryanton, who is a part of our older adult, and I think she's probably blushing right now. She's like, oh, stop, Ash. She is a part of our older adult and caregiver advisory board. She is an outstanding researcher and really understands how to create relationships. As someone that did her PhD as an older adult. So yes, so I just want to give a shout out to Olive. I've learned a lot from her too, and it's a pleasure to work with her. Yes, so how long would that you suggest that introductory be? I think, you know what, I hate to say it, but as long as it takes. Sometimes we can't rush those. We really feel like we need to rush those relationships, but you can't. Trust takes time. Particularly for members, like, for example, the Indigenous community, if you are working outside of there, if you're not a member of that community, sometimes it takes years to create that trust because of past traumas of colonialism. So it really depends on each community. I would say, for me, in my experience, I would say like having at least 2 meetings with those communities, whether it be like 2 information sessions or conversations, really allows to kind of like have that first introduction and then a follow-up. But I have to say, sometimes it takes as long as it can, as long as it takes, but more importantly, as long as it needs. And that's something that you really should build into your ways of connecting with those communities. If you rush it, and I know I very much think Olive would agree with me, sometimes, yes, and I see, Ian, I'm gonna look, I just saw just the little thing, Breaking Bread, and so I'm also thinking of Ron Valeno right now. But yeah, sometimes it takes time, but if you rush it, there might be a feeling of disingenuine feelings, right? Because you have to remember, some of these people have had bad experiences with researchers, and you want to ensure that you're not going to re-trigger some of those traumas. So really look at, okay, how can I create those relationships and build that time in? And also, if you're unsure, maybe ask a person that's from that community that you're working with, whether that be that community consultant, how long do you think I should plan? in those kind of introductions. I'm telling you, if you do take the time that it needs, those are people that you will continue working with for the rest of your life. I promise you. I can tell you, I've been working with my communities that were part of my PhD for over a decade, and I'm still on the board. I'm just on the board now with some of them, and they're my friends. So, these are some of the things. How do you ensure? So Edith is asking, how do you ensure retention of older adults in your research? So I think that's a great question, Edith, and I really appreciate it. So this idea of retention, when I hear that, I really think of like, how do we create long, sustainable, and meaningful relationships with the people that we're working with, particularly older adults? And to say that, it's really important about saying, okay, how can I not just include them in this project, but multiple projects? How can I include them in presentations, for examples? For me, in my course of my career, working with deaf and disabled artists, that's my main research from my PhD, is I will include them in anytime I was planning events. I would ask them if they'd like to be panelists, present. If I was co-editing journals, I would also invite them on and to participate with me. And so really constantly creating invitations for them to share their work from their voice and not just mine. I do see lots of things in the chat, so I'll go there. So I see Isabel. I just wanted to read by HBAL. Oh, so I'll just read this out. So Isabel shared, I really appreciate strategies. I just conducted a study that is funded by HBAL to understand sedentary behavior in older adults. I use several recruitment and retention strategies to recruit older adults of diverse backgrounds. So low SES and visible minorities that is embodied in Black feminist research. Yes, love that, Isabel. I think that's so great. I think just going back to what Ian was saying, being dynamic, great point. What frameworks are you working from? Not just like ones I even mentioned today. So that's really good, really great, Isabel. We should do a webinar on that. We found that the recruitment strategies, just continuing what she was saying, we found that the recruitment strategies worked, but not our retention strategies. 92% of our participants of low SES visible minorities dropped out because of medical mistrust in the research. So she asked, do you have strategies to combat medical mistrust and the retention strategies? Yeah. So I am someone that that has worked in the humanities and social sciences. And I think it's, again, looking at, and I'm not saying at all this is what Isabel and your work did, but I think sometimes it's like, sometimes accepting, well, there's two ways we can look at this. Sometimes we just need to understand that no matter what we do, something might trigger past really traumatic experiences for folks, and just dropping out is maybe a healthy thing for them to do for their own well-being. And I think it's important to promote that. So when you are working with the older adult participants, or just in general, people that are, brain fart, guys. Sometimes this happens. I've never happened this in a webinar. I'm going to be totally honest. I forgot my train of thought. Do you have strategies? Oh yeah. So just in general, had bad experiences with that. Excuse me there. With researchers or just medical experiences. Sometimes they do need to step out, and you need to let people know, and that shows a lot of trust. Saying to them as they agree to be to participate in your research, I really want you to know that if you need to leave this process for whatever reason, do not worry. This is, a part of the work. Please, if you need to drop out at any time, that's okay. And you need to be prepared for that as a researcher too, because that's going to happen. In terms of combat of medical mistrust, ask them. I think sometimes we, again, go back to that assumption of like, we know best, but we don't. They know best. So ask them, how can I make this experience more comfortable for you? What are some of your concerns? We don't ask this sometimes. And if we ask this again at the beginning of the conversation, not but versus like until something happens, if we ask it from the beginning, we can anticipate some of those anxieties or feelings of what might happen. And if you were able to create those spaces, of feeling comfortable, then that again can combat some of that medical distrust. I also think it's really important to share that like you want to understand their bodies and their medical uh, kind of understandings of the medical diagnosis with them, not for them. I think that's really important. So again, that's another thing, but making those conversations with them, not for them, is what I would recommend. Um, and also, I think understanding cultural backgrounds. But I do want to just give a shout out to Isabel. Yes, like just frameworks, looking at different frameworks, being dynamic. We're all coming together in this, guys. I love this webinar. Ian said breaking bread at the follow-up can be very helpful. Yes, breaking bread. And we have our other co-chair, Ron Boleno, of the Older Adult and Caregiver Advisory Board. This is something he always talks about, this idea of hashtag what he calls breaking bread, which I think is so, so important. It's again, not just creating a meal, but even just going to a cafe that's near that person and just having a conversation with them. All of my research relationships begin there. Just sometimes going to a cafe, meeting them in an accessible space, and just having an informal conversation with them. Like, what would bring you to research like this? What are some of your expectations and concerns? And again, that also might help with the medical mistrust. Do be careful though, when you ask people about those anxieties, because if there is a background of potential trauma, you don't want to feel like you don't want to force them to disclose anything. So you can just say, hey, I understand that maybe you have a bit of hesitation. How can I help to make you feel more comfortable? Or what do you need from me to create that space to be supportive for you and your needs? Again, starting that from the beginning, the first conversation, and not waiting until something happens that you need to have that conversation. Ian also shared retention, understanding the motivation your older adults for participating. Absolutely. I think that, this is maybe where I'll potentially wrap up. We might have room for one more, but Susan, I will get to that. I see your question. Good way to sneak in there in a good way. Just really looking at older adults want to participate with research. They do. But the thing is, they need to know what they're contributing to, how big of an impact they're going to be. They want to have recognition. They want, and for the work that they do, they want to contribute to creating digital solutions. So these are all great things. Susan asked, I'm currently attempting to enhancing the diversity of our panel of research advisors, as our group is currently extremely well educated. A session on the best means of engaging others. I think the best way, I do think that one of the ways, and it depends on like who you do want to reach out to, but I highly recommend, if you do have access to funding, if you are a researcher that is funded or you are working with a supervisor that has funding, sometimes, like I said, hiring a community member consultant or someone from the community that can do that research, that can find people that can work with you, is the great way to do it, because they'll be able to recognize gaps that maybe you don't see because of your own lived experience. So looking at people that can really understand what those gaps are. So someone with maybe an EDI practice, that can really look at, okay, these are the people that you're missing and these are groups that you can connect to. Let me be that person to help you start those conversations. And you can, I think with the community, if you do hire a community consultant, it's very important to ask them what is their rate first before just offering what you would like to give them. Ask them like, what is the rate that you would like to be paid at? I am at time. Oh, no access to additional funding. Okay, so I'll take another minute here, just because I think that's important. So if you don't have access to that funding, which I think is very common for a lot of us, I think the best way to do this is to get together with your other colleagues that are part of those whether it be your research team or advisory board, and say, where are the gaps? And creating a list of community groups that you feel like you can connect to that maybe can have an idea of a person that would potentially you could come on. So absolutely. And yeah, community centers. Calling community centers, I think, is a great idea. Again, it takes time, but again, creating that list of potential community organizations and advocacy groups that you can reach out to, making that first introduction and saying, we are really looking for this type of person. And you can always create a call. Create a call just the same way you would do for a research participant. This is the type of person we're looking for right now. This is what their role would be. And that's if like you don't have access to funding. I have gone a minute over. This was fantastic. I will be doing more sessions like this, especially from an EDI perspective, and maybe we will do one for advisory boards. Going back to this idea, what do you do when you have funding and you don't have funding? So I just really want to thank you all for this amazing webinar. I do hope that there was some useful information here. If you do have any questions, you can email me and at the training email, or you can find me on the my personal email on the website. And thank you so much, everyone. Have a lovely Tuesday, and I wish you all the best. Thank you so much for being here. I'm jazzed, everyone. I'm just jazzed. Okay, bye.